Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Vav. We're actually up to daf Vav on the base in the top of the page. We're sort of always stopping by the end of the sugya. Too hard in these inyanim to stop right in the middle of the sugya. So the last thing we learned about was we were talking about Maris Nagoyim, and we'll continue talking about Maris Nagoyim, the different shades of white. And we said basically that our Mishnah says there were two others, two principal colors, and each one has its ancillary. So we had Se'es and we had Sapachas. And we had Se'es and we had Baheris. Baheris is the strongest one, that's Snow White. And its ancillary is seed, is chalk. And then we had Se'es. And Se'es is white like wool, and the wool of a sheep. And its ancillary is the white of an egg. And according to our Mishnah, each of has its own tulda. And you can mitzaref the av and the tulda. You can combine the av and the tulda if they both have less than the required amount, which is a grease, like a bean, and the size of a bean, and you can combine the two together. So you can combine the se'es with the white of an egg, and you can combine the baheris with the white of chalk. Contra Bakiva Zela Maila Mazeh. Contra Bakiva Baheris, nothing can mix together with Baheris, nothing can join Baheris. It's on its own. Se'es has two tuldas, because he only going to go one up. Se'es has two tuldas. Se'es has a tulda of the white of an egg and has the white of the chalk. And then we said, how do you know that snow, Baheris, is the strongest one? Because it says Levana, she is the whitest of the white. So we're up to Daf Vav on the base, the top of the page, 6 lines from the top. Tanu Rabbanan. Our Rabbanan learned. So we're continuing discussing Goyim. Baheris, we said before that the whiter it is, the deeper it looks in the skin. And the less white it is, the more lifted it is. And that's why, as the Gemara was saying, Rashi quoted before, Se'es means lifted, because it's less white than the Baheres, than the snow white. So Tanam, we learned, Baheres, Amuka is deep. And actually, it says in the Pasuk, it looks deeper than the skin, because it's whiter. Kemara Chama, like the the sun is deeper than the shade. The sun is deeper than the shade. So that's, in other words, the brighter it is, it looks like deeper. Se'es, what's se'es? The word se'es itself, ein se'es elagavaya, sort of lifted a little bit because it's not so white, it's a little bit off-white. It says actually in Pasuk, I'll call harim haramim v'I'll hagvois hanisais. So we see there that all the mountains that are raised and all the hills that are elevated, lifted. So we see that the word seis means lifted. It lifts up. Sepachas. So what kind of leprosy? Right now the Gemara thinks that sepachas is a third kind of leprosy. What exactly is sepachas? Ain't sepachas el tefillah. It's not the name of a leprosy. It's actually like a drag along. It's been slept along. It's a secondary. Sepachas means secondary. And it says it says in the pasuk that Eli was cursed that his children, grandchildren will no longer be working in the Mishkan. Probably they'll have to attach themselves to the Kohen to be able to get their portions. So Safachani means attached. And the machlekes between Chamim and Rabbi Akiva is going to Chamim, Se'es has an attachment and Baheres has an attachment. According to Rabbi Akiva, because it says Se'es and Sapachas is only attached to Se'es, not to Baheres. So only Se'es has secondary ones, the two colors, two off-whites, and not Baheres. It has nothing there. Ashchan Feila Se'es, it's Feila Beminol, it says the Pasuk, it says Se'es, Sapachas, and Baheres. Okay, so Sapachas is attached to Se'es. Where do you see that also that Baheres has a tool? Our Mishnah learns that Baheres also has a secondary one. It says Levana b'Se'es. It says the color white by Se'es, right? It says Se'es Levana ba'oil, and then it says V'nemar Levana b'Heres. We had before Levana he Ma Levana hamuda b'Se'es. So now we make it clear, just like the Levana or Hekesh, just like the Levana, which says by Se'es, yes, the trade has a secondary. Av Levana hamuda b'Heres, the trade also has a secondary. The Masnita Tana, that's how we learn one place. But the Braisa we learned, Hitel HaKosov L'Sapachas, the word Sapachas is written, Bein Se'es L'Baheres, a sandwich in between the two. Loim L'Ach, I tell you, Kishem, Shetfei L'Osei, we don't have to make any Bamemetinos or Hekeshim, just the structure of the Pasuk. Se'es, Sapachas, L'Baheres. Exactly. Katfei L'Baheres, each one has their secondary one. Se'es Katzabalavan, we said, what color is Se'es? Like white wool. Is wool that white? Says the Gemara, might what do you mean white wool? When is wool white? We're talking about the first day that a sheep is born, and what happens is the first thing is the mother of the sheep licks the wool of the sheep. It's the baby sheep, and with that licking cleans any particles off. It's totally white, and then the farmer will go ahead and he would put some kind of material or cloth wrap it around the sheep, and then buckle it together to remain this pure, this white, and that's what se'es is, pure white. Omar Rab Chanina. Now the Gemara is going to give different mishalim to. You have two avos and two tuldas. The Gemara is going to give different examples, and I don't understand. I try to figure out why we need a number of different examples, basically all saying the same thing. So it must be each one is saying something a little bit different. I haven't figured out yet what it is. Maybe they say it over there. Omar Rab Chanina says, Moshel the Rabbanon. Remember, the Rabbanon said there are two principles, and each one has the secondary. If you want to understand the Rabbanon, what is it compared to L'trei Malki? There were two kings. L'trei Yivchei, two officers. Malki Shazel and Maile Malki Shazel. One king is superior to the other king, right? So that's like Se'es. Baheres and Se'es. Baheres is the principle is superior white than the Se'es. And then the Friche Shazel, and then this officer's highness officer. So the officer of the superior king is a higher officer than the officer of the inferior king. So Baheres has a tulda, and so does Seis have a tulda. It sounds like the way we understood it is that the way it sounds like is you have this sounds more like Rabbi Kiva. You have four strata. The highest is the superior king. The next one is the inferior king. The next one is a higher officer. The next one is a lower officer. That's Rabbi Kiva. Not that two separate, channels. What is he right? The king is superior to his officer, so that's one line. Exactly what the Rabbanon say. Two kingdoms, each one has their own officer, and each one goes down their line. So the king goes to its officer. So in other words, Baheres has its tulda, and Seis has its tulda. Not that Rabbi Kiva learns this one line, straight line, and each one is higher than the next. Okay, so the is very understandable. Come along about it, Amar, he says, I'll give you an example. Malka v'aklafta. You have a Malka, a king, like an emperor, and an Alkafta, a small king, of a small country. Not it's also a king, also royalty, but a much lower degree. Then you have a Rafila, you have the officer of one kingdom, and then you have Reish Galusa. Interesting. From here, you see that Reish Galusa is considered royalty. The Reish Galusa was that a member of the family of David HaMelech was appointed by the government, and we had actually Sanhedrin that the Sanhedrin in Babel had more power than the Sanhedrin had more authority than Sanhedrin at Yisrael, because they had the Reish Galusa behind them, and they can levy taxes. Yeah, he was, and here you see right here, it's considered royalty, but these are degrees of royalty. Says the Gemara, again, it sounds like it's linear. So you sound like this Rabbi Kiva, 4 steps, 4 strata. Malka v'Rafila, you have the superior king, the greater king, and Rafila and his officer, and the lesser king with Reish Galusa. Now, how is this different? What is he adding that we wouldn't have known from before? And this is the same idea. Trey Malka, and here you tell me, in other words, you're telling me that this is ace. In the first one, you have 2 Malkas, Mamish 2 kings equal, except one is a bit superior. Here, it's the gap between the Malka and the Al-Kafta is far more than 2 Malkas. So is he trying to say that I think that the Se'es, there's a bigger gap between the Se'es and the Beheres than like 2 kings? It's more, is that what he's trying to say? But what's the point of that? Maybe we know what the white of a wool looks like. So I'm not sure. Then comes along the Rava, and he gives another example. He's going Shabar and Malka. Now he makes it real. Instead of talking in theory academically, 2 kings, let's talk about kings in our lifetime. You have Shabar and Malka, the Persian king, and you have Caesar, you have Caesar, you have the Romans. You have 2 kings. And each one has the secondary. Now this is very interesting about it. Papa said to the Rava, now remember, they lived under the Persian rule. They live in Babel. They weren't under Rome. So Papa said to the Rava, so which king is the greater one? Okay, what is the Se'es and what is the Beheres? Which is which? In other words, as the Mephoshim explained. But Papa knew that Rome is superior to the Shabbat Malka, but because the Rabbi mentioned first Shabbat Malka, maybe you think that Shabbat Malka is more chashuv. On Malays, we say that somebody who's brought up, like a Batlin has no idea what's going on, a chizud hayalma. So this expression in the Gemara. On Malay, he said to him, it must be bechur shei ka'achol. He's been eating it out there in the forest the whole time. He has no idea of what's going on in the world. He's asking me such a silly question: who's superior, Rome or the Persians? Puk chazi, go out and see. Tiva the man sagib alma, whose name is spread throughout the world. The chsiv, but it says in Pasuk, but it says in Pasuk, but Kol Ara, he ate that the Romans will eat up the entire land, with Tadeshna, they'll thresh through it, with Tadakna, and they'll crush it. It's all about Rome. So therefore, what's the shayla? So all Rabbi did was he took the Mishalim and made it more real, made it more, let's talk about the Manzach, you can understand what I'm saying here. And so Rashi explained Rashi says, Ish Hazeh, this person, Mutmin B'Yarim Kol Yomav. He must have been hanging around the forest his whole life. Shaloi Shaba B'Tiba Shabachos Reibi. Exactly. Okay, now you meant the more expression. But Chushi Kochla, he's out there in the forest all of his years. Rabbi Yechon said, and Rabbi Yechon said, Zu Reimi Chayev, it's the Reimi, the Russian, the wicked ones. The name went around the whole world. So all Rabbi did was he made it more real. But so far, I still don't understand why he had the two Mishalim, other than to say that maybe the gap between Se'es and Be'er is the greater. But I'm not sure exactly what that machlek is either. I mean, just look at the colors. Remember, we had before, any coins out of bucky in colors shouldn't get involved in the first place. Ravina gives a third mashal. And what's he adding? Instead of talking about kingdoms and monarchs, he gives a mashal more with colors. So Ravina says, keep going, and this is what he says. This is, say, for example, you have a glima de Amr, you have a shirt made out of wool that is totally white. When it's brand new, it's totally white. The shachke, and then you have when it's been used for a long time and it's fading and shredding, and obviously it's not so white anymore, right? Then you have another. That's one category. And the other category is sadina de kisna. We have linen. It's not as white as the wool when it's brand new, and then b'shachke and its remnants. What are they all adding to each other? There's something here. Something going on. Gemara should spend 3 mishalim. Does he say anything over there why you have to have 3 mishalim? What are they arguing about? What are they saying? Speak louder, yeah.
And someone says to you, no. And then he says to you exactly the same thing that you're saying, but with different oasis. I see it all the time.
Yeah, but the Gemara doesn't do that. There's something going on over here, and I don't know. I don't know what's going on here.
Everyone has a limit that any time they bring another.
Yeah, always. You're adding something, or either arguing or adding something to make it more. Bottom line is the first two are about monarchs, about royalty, and the secondary, and the last one is about colors and materials. I don't know. I don't know.
The degree of difference.
But what's the third one? I don't know. It must be the degree of. You would think. You would think the third one is the closest to what really is going on. So what was the first two about kings? What they're all about? I don't know. There's something going on over there. I just don't know what it is. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the mission now. Now we're going back to Tumah. Remember we talked about there's a unique carbon, a carbon oil of the Yedid. All the other carbon, well, here's a carbon of the Yedid. But commensurate to your economic status, that's what you pay. And when do you make a carbon oil of the Yedid? Only if it was you knew you were Tameh, you forgot you were Tameh, you walked in the base of Migdash, you ate some Kaddish, you ate Karbanis, and then you remembered it. If you wouldn't remember, then I'm talking about. And then you remember, so you bring your carbon oil of the Yedid. If you never knew in the beginning, and then we say that the carbon of Yom Kippur is going to take care of it. If you knew in the beginning or the end, the carbon of Yom Tov and maybe Rosh Chodesh Had Machlekes will take care of it as well. So now the Gemara is going to say, how do you know that if that you were Tameh and you went to the base of Mikdash or you ate Kodesh, that's what we're talking about. Carbon of all it says is you touched Tameh and everything else. It doesn't say what you did. So how do you know? How do you know that's what you did here? How do you know what you did was you went ahead and you went to the base of Mikdash? All it says is that you forgot you were telling me they're ashamed and you're guilty Guilty of what? Is it the etzem touching? That's a problem. For that, you bring a carbon over the edges for touching, becoming tummy. Is that what it is? Or you did something. We learned you did something. You ate carbonates. You went to base of English. How do you know? Says the Gemara. How do you know the puzzle talking about that you walked in the base of English or you ate carbonates with that tumah? The dinu, because it makes sense. Since the Torah already told us that that you're not allowed to eat a carbon while you're a tummy, and the chayiv carbon ala tumah, and now we're told that if you became tummy, you mean a carbon. So we say, ma kishehiziv honest. The Torah warned you, and says you get cutters ala tumah. Like he's honest ala tumah mikdash kedoshim. They're talking about the base of mikdash and kachim that you're going to get cutters. So af kishechayiv carbon. Now you tell me you chayiv a carbon oil on tumah. So what did you do? You probably did the same thing. Is ala tumah like chayiv ala tumah mikdash kedoshim. It's talking about you that you ate Kodesh, or you went in the base of Mikdash. Because it says in one puzzle, Tamus Mikdashi, clear. It says you mean Tamus Mikdashi. If you did, you get Kodesh. And by Kachim, it says you shouldn't eat until you become tired. Again, it says the Gemara. The aim, how do you know? Maybe Truma. Maybe because we know if a person ate Truma, you also get it's an Aveda. Because it's amazing Aveda get me to the Shemayim. So maybe that's what the Torah means. And if you're tummy and doesn't say, "Va'ashim," you're guilty. Guilty of what? You're guilty of eating truma. That's what you mean, carbon out of the ages. Who says truma carbon? How do you know? Truma shehiziv anish says the Gemara. Because what's the punishment for truma and what's the punishment for kodesh mikdash? For kodesh and mikdash you get curse. For truma you get misa de shemaim. And remember that all the karbonas that we have in the first mission in Krisus, the 36 karbonas there. When do you bring a carbon chatas? Only if you get curse. So therefore, since we're talking about a carbon. Okay, so the Vayeda different than a carbon kavua, but because we're talking about a carbon, it's obviously talking about an Aveda associated with Karis. Must be talking about that you were talking about you ate carbon. So tell me what this means. But ashkel of a misha the chayv the carbon. You don't find that if the Aveda you did, you get misha the shemaim and b'shegi you bring a carbon. Says the Gemara, you're right. But maybe there's two kinds of carbonas. The general carbon is you got to bring a carbon chatz, a sin offering. But over here, we bring a special carbon that only 3 Avedas you bring. A carbon oil of the like Tumah, you bring an oil of the or we said Shavuos Daf, if you swore that you don't have Eidos, turn out to you do. So you bring a carbon oil of the Shavuos B'Katan. So we're talking about a certain, maybe a carbon oil of the I don't care if it's Kodesh Shemaim or Misa de Shemaim, you bring a carbon oil of the when do we say that you don't bring a carbon if there's no chorus, if it's a fixed carbon? But if it's a carbon that's commensurate, they say maybe do bring. I'll bring a raya. If you made a shvua that you'll do something, you didn't do it, you bring a carbon oil. And if you didn't be amazing, I made a shvua and deliberately I didn't keep my shvua. Do I get misa? I don't get misa at all. Forget about misa shemaim. I get no misa at all, and yet bring a carbon. But you wouldn't bring a normal carbon, only oil of the So we see that carbon oil of the has very different rules than a carbon kavua. So maybe it's truma truma, maybe it's truma truma, and maybe taka for kachim. Another one, if you did a b'sheg, you bring a pepper carbon chatas, not an oil of the On my cross, and you know how we know? Because it says a pasuk that if in this continuation of that, where it says you touch when came tummy, but Ashim, it says also if you touch, the next part it says if you touch the tomb of a person, not only touch a behemoth, but you touch the person, any tomb it is, and you forgot, and there it says, you became tummy with it. What's the ba? With it, as if to say, ba. It's limiting it. What is limiting it? Ba is coming. It says l'chol tumah said any tumah that you became tummy with. Ba with it. What do you mean ba? It comes to exclude. It comes to limit to tell you that only if it's kodesh de shemayim, not if it's tumah, which is misa b'dei shemayim. And we're talking about coming out of the yajus. So maybe that's how we know. But maybe aimable mutim mikdash. Maybe fakert. Who told you ba is coming to limit, to exclude truma? Maybe it's coming to exclude the mikdash. And or the carbon, both of it. Because remember, the pasuk all says you're guilty. We don't know what you're guilty of, so maybe you're guilty of eating truma. But anything tell you only truma. But if you ate carbon, or if you went to make for that, you're in carbon, a fixed carbon chatas. The lesagile become maybe it tells you that for the base of mikdash carbon, all of you is not good enough. I don't care what you can afford. Add the ma'aseh carbon kavua. Maybe then you bring up first carbon. How do you know? Because remember, the pasuk all says you're guilty. Says you might have cut it, Rabbi, later Rebbe. So Rabbi seems to have a lot of nice sayings. He's the one who said over there, Papa, that he said that the guy must have grown up in the forest. Here he says that he said a comment about the Rebbe. The Rebbe is able to draw water from the deepest bitis. In other words, he finds makaidas for things that we don't know, but he was able to find sources for halachas. And he says, Tanya learned, the Rebbe says, Ekrani, I can say, Chaya Behema. It says whenever it says Chaya Behema, automatic is included. We had by Kashas, we had in Shmini. Now this is the Chaya should eat, and then we talk about behemoths. Chaya Behema is included. Yet in the pasuk, in the pasuk before it says Ki Yibatu Adam. In the pasuk before that it says, if you touch B'chol Davar Tamei, Oy Ben Aveil Chaya Tmeya, Oy Ben Aveil Behema Tmeya. It's extra. When you behave, Chaya automatically includes behema. So he says, Ekron Yechaya Behema Lama Nemra. What in the world do I need the pasuk to spell out Behema? I'll tell you what. Nemra can here it says Behema Tmeya. It says we touch a Chaya or Behema Tmeya. The Nemra Lahala, and it says later on that if you touch any talk about kabbalah, it says if you touch something in tummy, and if you eat a korban shlamim, you get kaddish while you're tummy. And that pasuk it says also if you touch a Behema Tmeya, and what do? You get kaddish. Malahal, and what are we talking about over there? It's talking about over there that you ate a carbon. Malahal and tumas kaidish. Like over there, it's talking about you ate a carbon while you were tummy. Avkan tumas kaidish. This pasuk tumas behema here talks about ba'ashim. You're guilty. What are you guilty of? Eating a carbon. Okay, so that's how we know that this pasuk is telling you definitely, but you ate a carbon, you ate a carbon, other you ate it. Says the Gemara. Okay, that tells me a carbon. But how do you know the base of English? How do you know those are high for the base of English? Maybe you need a proper carbon. A fixed carbon. Ashkel tumas kaidish. But tumas migdash on. How you know if you walk the base of migdash? Okay, what comes to limit? You have a limud behema tameya from shlamim. That's only if you ate karbanas. How you know if you walk the base of migdash while you're tamei? You bring a carbon out of the b'shegig. On makra, it says in another pasuk. It says in last week's parsha that while she has to wait the 40 days or the 80 days, after she gives birth. And then she can go ahead in the base of English. It says there during that time, it says there she shouldn't touch any karbanas, and the elam migdash leisavai, and she shouldn't enter the base of English. So what do we see from here? That the two are linked together. Whatever dinim you have when it says in this particular state, don't eat the carbon, the same din will apply to don't walk in the base of English. So that's how we know. Iskish migdash lekodesh. So we compare the two. So therefore, just like kodesh, if you're tamei and you ate, and you're talking about you ate kodesh, if you didn't know you bring carbon over, you ate it. The same thing applies to the base of migdash. So what does Bach come to exclude? Truma. Says the Gemara, if so, truma nami, then truma should be included. Why should be included? Because the because we learned a few times when it says in the pasuk, when the Taka says by her, by this woman, it says there until the day the Tara over. Now, if we're talking about kabbanas, it's not enough to wait till the sun sets. If we're talking about kabbanas, you got to wait till the next morning, following morning, and bring a carbon. Remember, she needs a carbon to be matter to eat. What is sufficient to wait until nighttime? You can go ahead. Truma. I told you that night I had a shemesh. Is truma. So even though it says kodesh, we learned that it means truma. No, so if you're using that pasuk to learn the kodesh, we compare it to the base of English, then compare also truma to this whole thing here. But it says Arma b'chol kodesh leisiga, you shouldn't touch any kodesh. We had this a few weeks ago in the Gemara in Marcus. The Rabbi says that truma, that's truma. Anymore, we have nobody can't learn truma. We have a word abba. So now we got a problem. We have a ribu, we have a miyat. We have a miyat bar that says we got to exclude something. That we have a choice to exclude truma or exclude kodesh, and you decided to exclude base of English. You decided to include base of English because it says in the part links two together, and you exclude truma. But the very same pasuk says b'chol kodesh leisiga, and you shouldn't go in. Kodesh is referring to truma. So how you know which one to exclude and which one to include? So you might aim a ball and English. The Gemara mistabra makes sense. Migdash matina makes more sense that Beis Hamikdash is similar to a carbon. Why? Because the punishment is the same. What's the din if you're tamei deliberately and you ate a carbon? The punishment is karis. And if you walk in the Beis Hamikdash deliberately, you get karis. They're the same. What happened to you ate truma b'mezid when you were tamei? You get misa b'dei shemayim. So l'chayda, Migdash and carbon are the same, and that is why we have to exclude something from carbon. Or it's truma. She came because if you have to put two sets, I would rather combine truma and hegdish and then base a migdash. And you know why? Because Sai Truma Sai Hegdish, what's the Aveda you're doing? You're eating. You're eating while you were tummy. The Beis Hamikdash, you walked in. It's a whole different category. So if I have to excuse or exempt one of them, I would exempt Beis Hamikdash and leave Truma in there, because Truma and Kodesh are the same. You're eating while you're tummy. Adrabah. Truma loimaytin. Shkena chilek in the same Aveda. But back to the question: how do you know to exclude Truma that you don't become obligated, but include Beis Hamikdash? I'll tell you how we know. Shalosh krises. There's 3 times as the word called by shlamim. If somebody eats a shlamim, but it says 3 times the word shlamim. It says that you shouldn't go to kach. For one is a klal. It says you shouldn't eat kachim while you are tamei, and another one it says it talks about eating the shlamim itself, and it says, and then it says also I never see wechol tamei, and it says v'nichas. So you have 3 kras. Lam achas leklal. One is general. Ukabanus. Tamei, and you eat it, you get kachis. The achas leprat. And one is specific for shlamim. And the achas, what's the third v'charis? The tumah haksuva b'tayda stam, where the tayda tells you stam, if you're tummy, don't do, and you're guilty. Guilty of what? Of eating shlamim, eating kabbanis. The enemy day mahi have a tumas kaidish, because tayda doesn't spell out what you did wrong. So I'm going to say, you know what you did wrong? You ate kaidish. Now, the email you don't need it for tumas kaidish. We already know the nafkalei mid the Rebbe. We learn it out from Rebbe, not from me. We learn it from Rebbe. Rebbe said behemoth tamei, so we know already that we compared behemoth tamei by shlamim. It became tamei to tell you that you bring that it's that pasuk is talking about that kind of tumah yeit kaidish, and therefore oil we know applies to kachim. But I'm coming to include something. What's the kachim coming to include? The lina to is migdash. Tell you what, if you walk the base of migdash. Now Rashi very interestingly explains it. It's a little hard to understand. There's why isn't this called klal prat? We're saying there's a klal, there's a prat, and you're telling me that the prat here is coming to not as ein b'chlal masha prat, is coming to explain the whole klal. And Rashi says we see that, for example, it's including all the 39 malachas. Anything to do with Mishkan, you don't know Shabbos. Comes along Savara and says l'chalak yotzes, right? You do one malacha, you would have thought you have to do all 39. You do one malacha, you're ready to bring a malach. You're ready to bring a carbon chatas. So what's it doing? We don't say ein b'chlal al mashu b'prat. That's it. We're limiting all malachas to one. We're saying now it comes back to reveal on the other 38 malachas that if you do any one of them individually, you bring a carbon chatas. So that's different than a klal prat. And why takid? So how do you know when to say ein b'chlal mashu b'prat, and how you know to come and say that the prat is revealing how to understand the klal, not coming to limit it. So Rashi says if it's far away, if it's next to each other. If the prat and klal are written next to each other, then ein b'chlal el mashu b'prat. But if the prat and klal are written in psukim apart, then the prat is coming to reveal how to understand the klal, which is here. So what are you talking about? You tell me 3 kisses. Why did Taka say the 3 kisses for another altogether? Lama achaz leklal, va'achaz leprat. Okay, to tell you what you just said, and the achaz ledvorim she'ein lechol. And one is for devorim. What about if you're tummy and you're eating that normally are not eating the wood of the base of the mizbeach? Nobody eats that, and yet if you somehow, even though we had a korban eitzim, even though if you go ahead and you touch whatever it is, you also chayiv. And that's what you need it for. Does the Gemara? If you ate the wood somehow, or if you ate potatoes, these are not things meant to be eaten. You're chayiv as well. So the Gemara, and that's what you need a third kaddish for. So the Gemara, Rav Shimon says, if you were tummy and you ate things which are not meant to be eaten, you're not included. So he also uses a third kaddish for something else altogether. And what does he use a third kaddish for? So now we're talking about a carbon. You ate the carbon that's brought out of Mizbeach, which are eaten by the kohenim and so on and so forth. What about the carbon of the chatas hapnimis? The salketat chamina. I would have thought. How you Rabbi Shimon said, "Kol she'einu karv Mizbeach achitzin kishlam," has to be similar to shlamim, which is brought out of Mizbeach. Ein chayavin alav meshupigel. For example, if you on a chatas pnimis, what do you call it? For example, the karbanos in your kippur. They're done they're sprinkled. Chatzmi means they're sprinkled on in the inside of the base of Mikdash, or the par of Kohen Mashiach, the par of they're all sprinkled on the inside of the base of Mikdash. There's no pigul there. If you check the wrong ideas, the wrong dates, or wrong places, there's no pigul. So in other words, there's different dinims. I would have also if you're tamei and you ate it, you don't get the karis. What says it? If you ate it while you were tamei, no. So the 3 kisses are all necessary for other things. Goes back to the question: how do you know to include Mikdash and to exclude Truma? So the dozen named Rabba in the same three psukim where it says Kodesh, it also says three times Tumah b'Shlamim. Three times it says by Shlamim that you were Tameh and you did it. Every time it says you get Kodesh, it says if you did while you were Tameh. And those three Tumahs, one of them is extra. Lamali achas leklal, so one's for klal, and the achas leprat, and one's for the prat regarding shlem itself, and the achas lektuma haktor exum b'teiras tam. Whenever it says tam tummy, which is what we're talking about over here, and then it says va'oshim you forgot, and v'helim and then va'oshim you're guilty. What were you guilty of? That you ate the carbon while you were tummy, and you didn't know, so you forgot. So therefore you bring carbon leviators. And even though we don't need a passing for eating because what we said before, so we use it for the base of English. Mahi, any mahi, have a tumas kodesh. We may tumas kodesh. I don't need it because why? The nafkim of the Rebbe, learn from what Rebbe said before. That says hey much more. The real tumas migdus. Talking about navi boile, we still need it. The tumas. I did the boile mix of kodesh because I'm a tmeis. So let's sagile. The tailor says kodesh. Don't tell you what you did. What's the shot? But Babu said you needed three creases. And the third, and the klal, the prat, and the third cover said the things that are not normally eaten, or for Rav Shimon, like the kabbanas that you sprinkle inside. And every time the Torah says kodesh, it has to tell you what sin you did. That what you were tamei. So there's nothing extra here. Once we explain why you need three krisos, we understand why you need three tumas. Ella Marava says Rabba asya tumasai. Make an equation of tuma. Ksiv hacha here it says by carbon oil yoyed l'chol tumasai. Uksiv hasam there it says. It says over there that if you touch nefesh and so on and so forth, and you walk in the base of English, you're matam base of English, and it says the you didn't spray yourself by the part of doing it, and there's tumah still there. Malahal and tumas they were talking about walking into the base of English, okay, deliberately walking the base of English while you're tummy. I've can't tumas English. So what do you need buff for? What do you mean? We said before to exclude Truma. But now that you explained we need a special pasuk to include Beis HaMikdash, and we don't have an extra pasuk to include Truma, so that's it. So then why would you think Truma you'll be chayiv kamla yoyda? You need a bar to exclude it. Obviously you don't. So what's bar coming to exclude? We'll just finish the sugi right here. Is bar lamali l'rabba is to include nevelas oivtayr. To include. Till now we were learning bars coming to exclude. Now we're saying what happened if you ate the carcass of a kosher bird. It's very odd. And you don't become tummy by touching the nevel. You only become touching when you only become tummy while you ate it. We would not, till now we're always talking about touching. We would not have known that this kind of tumor also generates the same chiyuvim karas and oleated. So come to mab and the veil is oivtayr. Said the Gemara, you said till now that bar is coming to Remayit. Now he's saying he's coming to include. So the Gemara includes the miyuta vayata. We have two miyutas. And we have a general rule when you have two exclusions, it's coming to include. Yeah, where the two miyutas. See, if it says a pasuk, if you touch. So that means it's limiting only to touching, not the veil of a which only is metame while you eat it. He says only if you touch it. The la barnegi but no, if you ate the veil of tie, no. Uksi, then it says buff. Again, only these ways and not any other way. So you have two exclusions. We're telling you the same exception. Comes to include. This finishes this sugi here, and we'll see tomorrow.
Okay.